So Jan, you volunteered to contribute on the way you are cleaning ponds. Nice to see you again, by the way. So can we give you the floor? And then perhaps in the meantime, we can ask Anastine if she can share the PowerPoint of Louisa. Jan, floor is yours.
Everyone. Thank you for letting me join you. Do you hear me all right? Is it okay, the sound? Good. Well, my experience with cleaning ponds is mainly with natural ponds, having a ecosystem that you need to consider when you want to clean it. And we asked the biologist what we should think about then. And his first advice was to think about sectioning the pond, so that you don't do the whole cleaning up at the same time, which is I think is a good advice. And the other advice he gave us was to do the cleaning when the population of frogs and salamanders and insects are at its best. And then that he said is in summertime. Summertime is not always the best time for gardeners to do this. So he said that if you have to do it in autumn, for instance, we should leave the leaves and the straws and the plants, if we could, at the edge of the pond, so that insects, for instance, that during wintertime they hide into the straws, for instance, they could still hide in the straws, and then in spring they could then enter the pond again. So there's some aspects there to think about. He also talked about the salamanders, and surprisingly to us, but we live in a cold country, so we know they have to hide for winter places with not so much cold. And they do this quite early in Scandinavia. Actually, from August on, they will try to find the best place to hide, and it's quite the competition to find the best place to hide. So you say they start early with this. But that means also that after August, September, it will be more safe for us to clean the pond in colder climates. It would be different in, of course, southern parts of Europe. The technique to do it, it varies a lot, and we talked about large estates today, and you might need an excavator, like a big machine, to do it. But our experience has also been that in smaller ponds, you could do it with, I would call it a harrow. It's like a big rake, but 1 meter, 120, 140 meter. And you could do it by yourself by just pulling it through. I can't really explain it better now, but you need to maintain them a little bit every year. And if you do that, you can actually rake out of if the pond is not too deep, quite successfully, I would say. But it needs to be done from time to time, and you can't wait 10 years till the next time we do it. So I thought that would be just nice to share that there are, and for us it's been like experimenting. We don't really know how to do it. We just have to figure out the way. We also used pumps with a tractor to pump it all out, but there's other different solutions, I guess.
So thank you very much for this very practical extra information. And I think indeed working with the wildlife in your pond is much better to really consider when are they hibernating or not, or is it safe to clean out?
The biologist also said that he wasn't too scared about cleaning them, because he said when they've lived there for 200-300 years, he said they are very strong. So that's that's the upside of it.
Yeah. Thank you very much that you were willing to share this experience with us. Are there any questions that still remain concerning the contributions of Steffi and Chris? Are there any? I didn't see any questions in either the chat or the Q&A. Is that correct? Am I missing something, or?
There's one from Kate in the chat, which says a question for Chris and Steffi. How did gardeners originally use the dipping pools? Did they have steps down to dip in watering cans?
I can
Thank
take
you,
that one if you like. Yeah, I mean, dipping ponds are exactly as they suggest. The term dipping is because they were there for you to dip your bucket in the pond and take the water to the needing plants. In the case of our dipping pond, that's exactly right. There are 2 steps down into the pond. But I'm sure different dipping ponds would have, different ways of facilitating it. But essentially, as long as you could get your bucket into the pond, then that was the objective of it. I hope that answers the question.
That's what I thought, and that's the experience I had in the garden I restored. But it did seem an incredibly laborious way of getting access to water.
Yes,
And we also had a water cart, which was a big tank on wheels.
okay.
But we never worked out how you would get that in and out of the pond. So I just wondered if you had any other ideas.
The point is we've been spoilt with hose pipes and whatnot. They just didn't have them in those days. They had buckets and that was it. Which is why we've got wells in at Croom. The garden is huge. So that at some point somebody decided it was a better option to dig a 15-meter well at the top of the garden and drop your bucket down there than it was to walk to the other end of the garden and bring the bucket back. But we've got 3 wells in the garden to support that irrigation system.
Interesting. So there. Sorry, Steffi, you go ahead.
I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand. I would think that would date from the Brown period, those wells, because at Burley there are several wells.
Yeah.
And rather than a dipping pond, whether there was a dipping pond at some station that's done away with, I don't know. But there's plenty of spring water from nearby in when the weather's favourable. But yes, this is the problem. A lot of it's guessing work, isn't it, Chris?
Exactly.
Well, I also found some evidence that, well, with our well, it was adjacent to the dipping pool, so right next door. And so it was said that the water was pumped out of the well into the dipping pool, to raise the temperature so that it wasn't cold to go on the plants, but also to clean it by having the sun on it. So in other words, a form of ultraviolet purification that we use now on our water systems. So that was a text I found from the 18th century, which said that that's why they did it.
Well, that's really interesting because we've actually, one of our 3 wells is right next to the dipping pond. And when we were restoring it, what we actually did was to empty the well, which is only about 3 meters deep, put a PVC lining in there, and then put a series of pipes down at the bottom. And we backfilled it with pea gravel all the way to the top. And we pumped the water down to the bottom of the well. It permeated up through the pea gravel, and then the overflow went back to the pond. So it was a system, and we had UV ultraviolet lights in the system, so it purified the water and kept the algae down to a minimum. But eventually, the PVC liner perished, and we've kind of moved on with the system since then. But it's interesting that you should observe that there was a well next to the dipping pond, as is the case at Croom.
Thank you. Sorry.
There's a second question for Louisa from Jonathan. Louisa, do the waterways have problems with pollutants and subsequent algae growth?
Yes, there's a lot of algae growth in the water. That's what you saw on the first picture. And there's also, my English, how do you call that? Where the water is cleaned.
Filtration.
Yes, but the big filtration, where all the households are, where the water is going to A plant.
Sewage treatment.
Sewer treatment. Yes, and that's the sewer treatment on the Baakse Beek. On this catchment is not giving back clean water, not as clean as it has to be, and we are changing the process now, and we hope that in 25 the plant has extra ways to clean the water, and then we are really closing the waterway that is near the Metler, because it's still there, because we don't want, it's not pollution in the way of stuff that is really good, but it's with the nitrates and the phosphates. It's too rich water. So when we have new procedures at the plant, then we are closing the waterway, and then all that water is going through through Metler. So it's not clean enough, but we are working on it.
Okay.
And just very briefly, would either of or any of the Dutch participants explain the difference in water boards from the Netherlands to the UK? Because in the UK, they were originally used just to supply fresh water into our houses. And I know in the Netherlands, they're very different.
Yeah, the water boards in the Netherlands, they are working on the water safety. So we protect the people with the dikes. It's the water management, and it's for the plants who clean the water, but not for the drinking water. All the other issues is for the water boards, and it's the same level as the local authorities. How do you call that?
Municipalities.
The municipalities, yeah.
It's the oldest bureaucratic institution in the world.
It is.
Founded in 1250. And the person in charge is not a mayor, but his title is Dijkgraaf. It's the count, the earl of the dikes. And if you do a lousy job and you want to quit your job, you put your spade in the dike, and that means that you're done with your job. I think Willem Sieleman was saying something from...
Actually, I just had a question for Katrien. A little bit change of subject about the Cockerill company who installed the steam engines in Germany. You were talking about Belgium, but in the beginning of the 19th century, in the period between 1814 and 1831, the present Netherlands and Belgium were a united kingdom under the Orange dynasty, and William I was one of his aims was to get the southern Netherlands industrialized. He lived in England for a while during the Napoleonic era, and he was married to a Prussian princess, Princess Wilhelmina, and also his mother was a Prussian princess. She was also called Wilhelmine. So I think there was a strong connection between the House of Orange and the Prussian kings in the royal family in Prussia at that moment. Could that have been? Could that have influenced? The Cockerill firm going to Berlin and to Potsdam and to work there, or is that perhaps a question that's open for further investigations?
Yeah, well, I remember I read something about it. The reason why Boyd traveled to Belgium, to the company, the Cockerill, that was why did they knew it. I think there was some family connection between the kings, yeah. But I can't quite remember, but there was some link, yes.
Yeah, but the Cockerill firm was invited by according to my knowledge, by King William I to the Netherlands, to Belgium, to present-day Belgium, and there he started his factory. Well, I think the next step was Berlin, Potsdam.
Yeah, probably. But it took some time to convince Cockerell to come to Berlin.
Oh well, yeah.
Yeah, and even the buildings where the new factory was founded in Berlin, Cockerell got them from the Prussian state.
Oh well.
So he was really funded to found his company in Berlin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, in the question and answers, I saw a new question by Gary Webb. I suppose that one is for Steffi, asking, did Brown or other 18th century designers utilize water features as mirror pools, which still or slowly moving water, do you know? Steffi, could you answer that one?
Oh, Gary, you've given me food for thought. I'm going to have to go back in my mind through all sorts of places. Certainly, it's a reflection. I mean, Chatsworth is what comes to mind, not a mirror pool, but he made the, by raising the level of the river, he calmed it completely. So the reflection of the house in the water and the gardens worked beautifully, and still to this day. But nice to hear from you, and you're at the front edge in the garden, in the National Trust gardens.
Okay, Gary, let us know in the question if that would be enough for you for the moment. It sounds like Steffi is going to look into it more and see if it. And Judith Roster in the chat comments that asks, like, would the pool at Bramham count as a reflection pool?
Yes, that's not a brown landscape, but it I think that's a more modern term in my mind. I don't think of people talking about reflection pools in the 18th century.
Do you think it's more a 19th century principle or terminology? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And Gary says, thanks, Steffi. That's good. I'm sure we'll talk more. So, are there any remaining questions? I don't see any others coming up. Are there questions from the different Alets?
Yeah, I was just thinking about mirror ponds. Now, maybe I misremember this, but I believe that in the 17th century, you would use a mirror pond. I mean, the Grand, not the Grand Canal of Versailles, but a little bit closer to the house. You can. This is like a mirror pond because you want the sun to be mirrored in your pond, because it's about the balance of the four elements of earth, water, air, and fire. And it's the only way to bring the sun down into your garden is by having it shine through a mirror pond. And I think they used the word mirror pond by then. But like I said, there is sort of a squeaky noise coming up from the back of my head of this knowledge popping out.
Mostly those are the best, those squeaky. Thinking like, oh yes, I think so. That would mean that it was built as such during the 17th century. But the question was more, okay, did Capability Brown use this concept also for visual?
No, I think he's really, well, I'm overstepping my boundary because that's Steffi's field, but I don't think he was interested in a mirror pond. He was more interested in
There's
harmony.
there's always an exception to the rule. There's a pond at Weston Park, and it's right next to, it's between the house and the walled garden, and the church nearby. And I would think that would actually effectively, it's small enough and would act as a mirror pond to reflect those features, rather than the sun. I'm sure they enjoyed, as we all do, water makes you think and reflect. Yes, it's certainly, I shall go back through all the water features I can remember and try and get to that thought. But I think they began to maybe later that they began to bring the water nearer the house, in ponds again, and go back to the earlier designs actually.
Yeah.
So please keep us informed if you find any. It would be nice to share it with all the participants for today. So perhaps for the workshop or later on we can put it on the website as a remark.
I'll do some homework.
Steffi found something and then elaborate on it. So Mercy is telling you that at the moment is the last chance to do the poll before we do the more like wrapping up of everybody. So this somebody in the panel still feels that they would like to have a comment on one of the other speakers or have a question. I mean, the floor is open. We still have some time. So if somebody has a remark or a question, I see a hand with Kate, please.
Well, I was just going to say we haven't talked much about more contemporary water features. I know we are interested in heritage water features, but increasingly gardeners are having to look after 20th century modernist gardens with a lot of reflection pools, mirror pools. And I actually had to look after or help look after one in Brooklyn in New York. And we routinely added dye to the water, which worried me. It was a natural dye, but it made it beautifully dark and set off the lotus flowers, which was the point of that particular pond. And I just wondered whether that other gardeners, Jan, for example, have you had to look after contemporary ponds where it is the sort of architectural function that you're really trying to share?
I wonder if I understand your question, Kate, but I remember the black dye from Wisley. I worked there for a short period just as a trainee. I think they've quit with that now. Wasn't that kind of fashionable for a little while and then it's out of the picture again?
I might be out of date, definitely. But yes, so I was doing that back in the, 1990s. So it might well not be used anymore.
I remember, I think it's maybe, I haven't seen it for a while, at least. But that was another part of your question about the architectural.
I think there might be people who have to look after ponds in contemporary designed gardens where it's not a function of irrigation or kitchen gardens. It's purely an aesthetic purpose, and how that alters your management, really.
Yes, I have not worked in any contemporary, so I just visited them, but
yes. I've just seen a comment. Aidan does still use dye in water features, and at Kew it's still used.
Okay, so
that's an interesting one. Yeah.
So it's still on.
Yeah, it's still on.
So any remaining questions?
Oh, Chris, you're waving. Have you got some
Well,
comment?
I'm just going back through the chat, and I noticed a cheeky question from Teresa Villars, which is a number one question that I get asked when we do group guided tours around the garden, and that is, who pays for it all?
Yeah.
I don't mind answering it. Basically, my wife and I own a business. We own a manufacturing business. We actually work in the music business, and we're a most unlikely bedfellow for gardening. Neither of us are gardeners. We work with rock stars and huge egos, but thankfully they also have deep wallets. So thanks to the rock stars, the wall garden is being preserved, despite our two amateurs taking it over. But I would qualify that by saying that we are enthusiastic amateurs with 24 years of experience now. So we do know a bit. But yeah, I don't mind answering. It's paid for by our income, and when work goes quiet, the garden, we turn the tap back. And when we're doing well, the garden does well. But we heavily subsidize it at the moment. But it is a good question, because the long-term plan for the garden is to make it financially sustainable, because we're not going to be there forever. We're the custodians of the moment, and our primary objective is to leave the gardens in a sustainable form, and that is our absolute number one priority. And what we're doing to achieve that is to create little revenue streams. I mean, we're funding the capital projects, obviously, and the restoration and the new projects that I mentioned in my talk. But we're pretty close to finishing that work now. There's one and a half glass houses to finish. We've got to finish the pineapple house, and then there's the orchard house, which is a big project. But after that, then it's kind of done. So then it becomes, the cost then goes on to maintenance. And the collaboration that we have with the National Trust is really a marriage made in heaven, because whilst we open the gardens to their visitors, that's it's an integral part of the Croom estate, of course. So why wouldn't we? But in exchange for that, we have an ever-growing army of volunteers who are both gardeners and stewards. And without those volunteers, it wouldn't work. So that's, we underpin it financially, but ultimately it's the support from the National Trust and its volunteers that give it that sustainable edge. I hope that answers the question.
Can I put a little rider onto that, Renske?
Yes, of course.
It's just to say, to those of you, people who have tuned in who are not aware of Croom, it is in the scheme of things probably, in my view, the most important estate, other than Blenheim and possibly Chatsworth, in Brown's works. And it is, for me, the most important of all the estates, because it's the first where he designed both the house and the landscape and moved the church. And in my view, I don't know whether thoughts have been made in heritage circles, but it would be wonderful to make it a World Heritage Site in view of the fact that Brown is such a larger-than-life person in garden design terms.
I have a meeting with the National Trust at 9:30 tomorrow. I will pass your comments on with enthusiasm.
Well, Gary might be in the same court and might understand as well, because he's the right person at the right time then.
Yes.
Noted.
So is David still here? Because
I don't know whether Gary is still here. David, I don't know if he's still listening or not, but I think
he left us, but I know he's also sometimes a member for
He moves in all the important circles of
Circles.
World Heritage,
yes.
and I think I'll email him to say this is sort of blossomed out of the
That
webinar.
would be a really nice effect of this webinar, yes. We put it as one of the outcomes of the project, yes.
That would be a big tip.
That would be nice.
We
But
can
it's a-
ask your king, he's a great gardener himself, and
Yeah.
he has some influence.
Yeah,
There
Wonderful.
we go.
yes. Oh, that's very good.
Thank you.
In the meantime, in the chat, there is another remark by Francie Cheeseman saying that I work in the 1930 gardens with decorative water features. My big problem is finding people who detect leaks and finding advice on what materials are acceptable to use in a 1930s setting. Fiberglass is great for waterproofing, but alters the look somewhat. So is there any of our speakers, panelists, who could advise Francie where she can find specialists that can advise on 1930 settings for ponds and decorative water features? Kate, would you know any working from that period?
No, I don't off the top of my head. So I think it's something we're going to produce a fact sheet from this webinar, like we have with all the others. So that's something I can start to try and pull together, is the experts that we can call on from the more commercial world. And it is true, as I was trying to sort of get at, that water features are a current industry. So if you Google fountain or something, you'll get some very high-tech industrial companies who will come and install an amazing water feature for you, which is still part of the same tradition. So I'll try and pull together something which will list different specialists in different areas.
I'm not sure where Francie is located. I cannot see it, but I know that in the Netherlands, Artis, that's our main large zoo, is reconstructed, for instance, some of the, not only like the Victorian glass house, but the planting and the water features around it are from somewhere 1930s, and they're looking into that now. So we can, I could add the link to Artis Zoo in Amsterdam with the fact sheet then at the end.
That would be great. And there's another question that's sort of related. So Chris, for Chris, about the dipping pool with the concrete base. Do you feel that there are swings in water temperature through the year? This is Jonathan's asked that question.
Oh, good question. For an honest answer, after we restored the dipping pool in 2011, for the first 2-3 years, it was used for dipping, but in a different sense. Because it was nice and warm in the summer.
Oh, right. So you were swimming in there.
Absolutely. Why wouldn't we?
Wonderful.
Well, in those days, we had no plans to open. So it was a golden opportunity. But with time, we lined the circumference of the pond with a shelf with pea gravel, with the long-term, with the intent of planting water plants around, which we subsequently did. And with time, bear in mind, it's now been 12 years. Over time, the silt and sediment and pond life has sunk to the bottom, and there's a big thick layer of sludge. So yeah, the pond does change in temperature. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of this week it was frozen over. Looking at the weather forecast, it's a very large surface area and relatively very shallow pond. So it is prone to temperature change very much, but so what? The pond life that lives in there survives very well. We've got lilies and we've got all kinds of rushes and reeds, and they all, they're clearly flourishing in there. From there on, the water goes up to the tanks and then through a network of pipes in the form of irrigation. So I think that the temperature of it is a great question, because I haven't really thought about an answer to it, but I'm thinking about it now. But I think where the water ends up in soaker hoses out in the garden, it's gone through so many different climatic changes along the process that it kind of is what it is when it gets there, you know, regardless of where it came from. I hope that answers your question, but I will give it some further thought.
Okay, great. So perhaps we can also have an update if you come up with another answer at the end of the webinar.
I'll go around with my thermometer.
Okay, I think I saw Steffi also waving.
Well, yes, I began to type instead. I just a couple of things really. When you were doing the archaeology of the pond, Chris, or cleaning it out, did you come across any evidence of fish originally being kept in the pond?
Okay, the short answer to that is no. Whether there would have been fish in the pond in times gone by, I can't answer. I wouldn't be surprised if it would have been so.
It's of a size, isn't it?
Yeah, and also the depth to the water. It would be difficult for a heron to. We have lots of herons around here.
Did you get to the original, keep to the original measurements of the pond?
Yes.
Virtually, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. We were faithful to that.
That's interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we thought about introducing fish over the years, but it's just another thing.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Another thing to tend to, so we've kind of avoided it. But as I say, we've got a lot of biodiversity in the pond anyway. There's dragonflies and great crested newts and a whole wealth of things that I wouldn't know what they are.
It is pertinent to the water management about the fish life and in bigger water features. And Brown did use these fish stews near his lakes, at Petworth, for example, to be able to keep the fish, to be able to restore, to lower the water level in the lake and empty out the sludge. So I presume that he did that elsewhere, whether it became common practice or not, and whether it is now in lake restoration. But it is something that has to be borne in mind as to where to keep the ponds. I know at Wimbledon, for example, they had a great wealth of fish, but that they went fishing with because they lowered all the water, and so all the fish were gasping and easy to get. So it's something that belongs to the bigger picture.
Yeah.
We have a new water feature in the making, so maybe that can become our fish pond.
Ah, right, good.
Yeah, but Steffi also showed us, I think, an eel trap. So I suppose the eel trap was more for consumption, or not?
Yes, I think so. It's right up near the walled garden and the house.
Yeah.
Quick for the kitchens.
Yes, very close by, handy. So are there any remaining questions? I see Christian also reacted on the question about 1930s and has another suggestion for Francie, so that's very good. So are there any remaining questions? So then I think I'm just going to do a short introduction of the connected workshop we're going to do in summer. And so let me share my screen again. Before, I think it should be this one. Oh, it starts all over. Okay. Am I visible? Why?
Yes.
Okay, this is the big one. So in relation to this webinar, there will be a 2-day workshop during the summer. So that's June 4th and 5th this year, organized here in the Netherlands. We will start the first day at Paleis Het Loo and their surroundings. So the idea is that we will start with wrapping up a little bit of the webinar. We hope that the participants will look at the webinar before they come over. And our idea is to take you all out by bike in the surroundings and try to trace back all those historic waterways that fed their water into the gardens of Paleis Het Loo, and also to get a little inkling on, well, although slight height differences for the Netherlands, it's enough to feed the water in the garden, but to give you a feeling on the lay of the land and where the water in the surroundings come from. Then the second day, we will take you, the participants, to the Roosendaal estates. Willem was talking in his presentation about tricky fountains, the fountains that trick fountains, the fountains that start working when you walk over it as a surprise. Roosendaal Estates is very known for the fact that they still have their trick fountains, their 17th century trick fountains. They also have a grotto, and experience a lot of problems with also water management due to the last years of drought. And in the afternoon, we would like to take you to Mettler. To Mettler. So to the Baakse Beek, the Baakse Brook project that Louisa was telling you about. And Louisa kindly offered to show us how it looks like in the field. So this is what we're going to propose. We hope to be able to meet a lot of you during those webinars. There are 2 other ones still coming. So there's the webinar in Gunebo on pathways and ways and pathways, I think you say. And there still will be a workshop on orangery plants that is still to be decided. You can follow us from the different websites and Instagrams. You know that this webinar is completely recorded, so you can have a look at it later or share it with other people which you feel that could be interested in the contents of this webinar. So for now, I think, thank you all for attending and being here. I think we had a beautiful field program taking us all the way from the 17th century up till very present day renovations as at Kroon Park. So thank you all for contributing. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.